Find out she's tougher than I am, all right? So one of them come the other day and said, she gave us homework. So now how many times have I given you homework? Not very often. Well, it's that time. We always do a little bit of review. Let's just think, first of all, about 2015. Most of us have lived long enough to know that each year will bring its own uniqueness. Every year has its own unique features, its own blessings and its own problems. Most of us can probably remember back, not all of us, but most of us can remember back 1963. Let's start there. What happened in 63? Kennedy, thank you. I was in 6th grade, but Kennedy, most of us can remember that, or many in here can remember that. So it defined a year for us. See, instantly you had an idea where we're going. 1968 defined a year for me. I got my driver's license. I was so happy. I was just about as happy in 1970 because I graduated. The jury was out on that one, so I was really glad. You're standing up there. They've just passed out your diploma, and you hate to peek to see if it's in there, you know. But it was, so I was very glad. 71, I got married. 74, I graduated again. This time I did a little better than I did the first time. 75, Michelle was born, so the 70s were big for us. In 77, we come to Latonia Christian. And then 77, Mikey was born. And I could go on, just like you could, but each year had its defining moments. Well, 2015 had its defining moments as well. As well as 2016 will have its defining moments for us. They'll have its own uniqueness, something that defines what that year has been for us. But the challenge is, how do we deal with the blessings or the problems that we have that year? Kara mentioned that, thank you. That was a good, right into the sermon. Well, 2015 has certainly had its share of difficulties, we know that. I'm sure that it would have both bad and good. But if we was to look at the headlines, I want just to review a few of the headlines. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. Here's what it's going to say. The God of this age has blinded the mind of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Well, if you used to look into the headlines for 2015, one of the very first things you're going to see is what? Terrorist. Terrorist. That's probably been defining for many. It's frightening. We started out the year in 2015. By April of 2015, terrorists had attacked a school in Kenya, killing 148 students. Kind of defines a year for us, doesn't it? Right off the bat. Terrorists are those who are blinded by hate. Blinded by hate. Hate in the name of God. And then we started becoming more familiar with the term suicide bombers. Even though we'd had some of that in years previous, it seems this year we've heard more and more about that. And then a new term would prop up that I'm sure that we'd used before, but I'd seldom thought about, called homegrown terrorist. Homegrown terrorist. No place was off limits. Schools would be attacked. Offices, we just witnessed an office complex being attacked. There'd be attacks in the marketplace and attacks in churches. Terrorists become synonymous with hate, but they were doing it in the name of God. Probably the next headline that might have come to mind, these are not in any particular order, would have been the economy. The economy is when we're blinded by greed. Blinded by greed. There's never a day goes by that we don't hear something about our economy. We hear that our investments and our retirement got to the day where it won't sustain us. And everyone else, the rich get richer and everyone else suffer. Prices, they've gone out of sight. Now I want you to think about this. In 1968, I bought a year-old car for $1,400. It was 1 year old. In 1967, the year it had come out, it cost all of $2,200. That's pretty amazing. High school kid has that car. The other day I looked at a new truck I was kind of interested in, and it cost more than my house. Does that make sense to anybody? It costs more in my house. The only difference is it's on wheels, and if I buy it, Deb's going to make me live in it. So you kind of get the idea. We've seen all of these changes, and our economy has been a big part of that. So prices are out of sight. To feed a family, statistically, a 4 costs $150 a week. Now, I'd like for you to start doing our shopping because often it costs that much just to feed me. It's not easy. It's not an easy world. We've seen the economy go out of sight. Imagine now if it costs $150 for the average family, what about the poor family? Fortunately, we have ministries that have come up like Action Ministry, and the last report, over 900 families a month. I think that's still in the ballpark there. That's frightening, folks. So yeah, that's helped define 2015. Probably the most defining headline of 2015 for Northern Kentucky is drugs. Blinded by addiction. Blinded by addiction. 2015 will always be seared in my mind and my conscience because of the drug issue that we are facing. Drugs cause 3 crises that I want you to see. They cause a community crisis. We are a community that is in a crisis, and we need to be aware of that. It's not just the family or the individual, but it's the entire community. Whenever a drug problem is existent in a community, your crime level escalates. Escalates. I had a funeral not long ago of an elderly woman whose husband didn't know how he was going to pay the bills because one of their children had taken everything they had, unbeknown to him, in drugs. Tough times. So now we got the economy affected by this, as well as our community. So our community suffers whenever there's a drug problem. Families are in crises because of it. Everywhere you look, as we've mentioned many, many times here, there's not a family here that is immune from it. Somewhere in your family line, someone has messed with drugs, and you're having to deal with it. And then there's that personal crisis. The personal crisis is that individual who has experienced this will have to live with that forever. So headlines of Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, it said that we are the center of the heroin epidemic. So the 2015 probably doesn't sound real good review, does it? But folks, let's go to refuse, number 2. Proverbs 29:18 will say this. King James Version, I just want to point that out.
Thank you.
I should have waited till next week, you know. Where there is no vision, the people will perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Where there is no vision, the people will perish. Folks, 2015 has definitely been tough. I know it's been tough for me. I've dealt with many of these issues that I've just spoken to you about. Fortunately, I've not had to deal with terrorists, but I've dealt with the other 2 right here in our community. And it's a very tough time, and that's going to define our 2015. But I refuse to be programmed by the negatives. And I'm asking you to join me. I refuse to allow a few terrorists to make that difference so that I'm afraid to live my life as a Christian and as an American. Every year will have its own share of bad things, and we know that. And every person and every family will have their issues that they have to deal with. Every church will have its critics. But I refuse to allow the negatives to determine who we are. You have and are making a difference right here in this community. Our candlelight service spoke volumes the other night. We had a large group out to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. Every year, LCC has made lives in our area better. So I can look at the headlines and say, oh, what a miserable year, or I can look and say, oh, how blessed we have been because our church stands firm in our community. See, that's who we have to be. We can't allow these other things to dictate who we are. That our community's a little brighter because we're here. The kids are a little better clothed because we're here. People are a little less hungry because we're here. Recently, I had a person come to me and say, thank you. I wasn't for sure what I was being thanked for. And they said, if it hadn't have been just for coming and the fellowship and the greet and dismiss time, it's helped me make it. And I wouldn't have made it this year without it. Just because the world is in a mess doesn't mean that we have to be. So let's look at 2016 with a vision of what can happen. Where there is no vision, folks, let me assure you, we have not lost our vision here. That's why we're stepping out and trying to take the lead in a support group with Jerry leading the way. That's why we're trying to do that. Let me encourage you that you have done great things. Think about your past 2 young associates. Mikey's at a full-time church. Josh is at a full-time church. Both of them preaching every Sunday. Starting right here with us. Starting right here. Oh, there's so much that we can look and say, what a good year. What a good year. We had decisions made. We've had lives turned around. What a good year. There are things about the year that's always going to be miserable. But for the most part, what a good year. We met every Sunday. There wasn't a day that the doors were closed. We've met on Wednesday night and opened the Word. We've never had a time when the communion table wasn't prepared. What a good year. What a good year. I refuse to be without vision. Vision of what the church can do. A vision of where we can be and what kind of future we can project. Whenever we think about all that has been done and all that we are doing and all that we want to do, we can't help but see, folks, that where there is no vision, people will perish. But we continue to grow. We continue to hold firm and solid in our average attendance. We continue to see often those who move out into the community, out of our community into another, but they continue to be in church. What a good year. That means that we have helped plant a seed of Christ within them. What a good year. Every year will have its difficulties. And I can allow 2015 to be defined by terrorists or drugs or by our economy. Or I can allow it to be defined by Christ. 2015, I know I personally grew in the Lord. 2015, I can say that I've studied more, I've read more, I've prayed more, and I hope that you can say the same thing. See, folks, let's refuse to let this world drag us down. Let's refuse Satan. Let's refuse knowing that without a vision, we'll perish. Now let's take this a step farther. I'm not just talking about the calendar year for our church. What about the calendar year for you? I hope you refuse to let your past year be defined by the bad things that's happened in your life. Some of you have had some tough times. Some of you have had some very difficult times this past year. And you know it and I know it. It's been a tough time. Don't let that define you. Why? Because you're still here. You're still in the house of the Lord. You're still lifting your voice. You're still singing. You're still rejoicing over what He's done for you. Be defined by the fact, I'm a little stronger this year than I was last year. I'm more spiritually mature this year than I was last year. I have a little bit more confidence in Jesus this year than I did last year. Can you define yourself that way? That's where I want you to be. So refuse to let these other things be a part of who you are. Now, the next one, I want you to renew. Renew. Review, refuse, renew. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. He didn't say that we were always going to have a harvest. He said at the proper time we'd have a harvest. He said don't become weary in doing good things. So I want Him to renew what we're doing. I want Him to renew within us the vision that we have for our community. Folks, please renew your vision for Latonia. Latonia needs us. It needs Latonia Christian Church. So renew your vision. Renew yourself with the Lord. As I watch the kids up and down the street every morning going to school, I'll go out and stand and watch. And I think, we have hope right here. These kids are coming by. Oh, some are rowdy. Some of you were rowdy when you were young. Some are noisy. Every once in a while, someone will throw a pebble and hit my glass. I keep trying to catch that little guy. And I know he's doing it to aggravate me because he's seen me out there. I can't help but smile because I know another kid that might have done that a time or two in his life. Renew. Renew that vigor that you have for your church family. Now, in that renewal, there's three things that I want you to renew. I want you to renew your strength. Your strength. I want you to renew that strength that God has given you. I want to take each of you to a dark point in 2015. You get to pick your own dark point. I want you to pick the darkest point that you can think about that you had in 2015. Maybe it was the passing of a loved one. Maybe it was some terrible thing that took place in your life. Maybe it was something that just overwhelmed you with grief. Whatever it was, I want you to go there. Now, if you're there, here's my question. Where did you find the strength to get through that? Most of you found it by looking into God's Word or talking to other Christians or some Christian being there holding your hand or walking with you. I want you to get there. Because, see, that's who we are as a people. So I want you to renew the strength that you had on your darkest day of 2015. The darkest day of 2015. I shared this earlier. It's a sad story, and I'll share it, but I want to share it with you because it made me think of this point. I had a young lady. I did a funeral for her husband. And she called me before the funeral. And she said, we're going to have a closed casket. But I don't have anyone to go in with me. Could you go in with me? This girl had never met me in her life. Could you go in with me ahead of time? That was her darkest day of 2015. And where did she turn? To someone that she thought walked with the Lord. I'm asking you to do that, folks. I want you to go to that very dark spot right now and think about where you had that strength. That strength that was so vital to surviving. The next one I want you to renew is your determination. Your determination. Sometimes we lose determination. We get to the place where we think, what's the use? What's the use? It's going to be the same thing day after day, time after time. What's the use? No. I want you to renew that determination. I want you to be determined more than ever before to see your journey through. Now, for all of you who are over 60, pay attention. The rest of you, in a couple of years, you can listen. For all of you who are over 60, don't quit! How many times do we see our seniors get to a place where we'll just get by? We'll go to church, but we won't be too involved. Get over it. Get involved. You're needed. You're needed. You need to be a part of what's taking place. Have that determination that I'm going to see it through. I'm going to see it through. Maybe it's a matter of shaking hands and greeting people. Maybe it's a matter of picking up the phone and making those calls. Maybe it's dropping a card. You would not believe how many times I go in someplace and they say, oh, thanks for the card. And I say, you're welcome. I didn't send a card, but I'm awful glad I got the credit. And then I'll call Sue and say, hey, thanks for the card, because I know it was Sue's class that had sent out the card. I made a call this week and was told that. Dana told me that on Christmas Day. Desi's son, Dana, he was sitting there with the card. He said, oh, thanks for the card. And what did I say? You're welcome. You're welcome. It was sent out by our Sunday school class. Folks, be determined. Now, for all of you who are under 60, be determined. Be determined. There's more yet to be done. I'm pretty sure that we are not the ones left behind. So that means there's still work to be done. Jesus is going to come someday. But be determined. And the third thing that I want you to renew is my hope, your hope. Lord, renew my hope. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. My hope is built on Him. My hope for this community, someone asked me not long ago, do you ever hope Latonia is going to be a mega church? Absolutely not. I hope that we're going to have a mega ministry, and we're working on that. But to be a mega church, well, first of all, we'd have to get rid of our old building. I wouldn't be too excited about that. We'd have to have a brand new building, spit, shine, and fancy. I like looking like a church. I don't know about you, but I like looking like a church. I like whenever I come in, I can look up and we have a steeple. That's kind of neat. Now, not everyone has to have one. Mikey's steeple blew off the other night. I told him I thought the Lord was unhappy. But I like looking like a church. I like the fact that I know all of you. Well, and I know about most of you. I like that fact. And that renews my hope. Every Sunday morning, whenever I come in, you're so kind to me. It renews my hope. Out of the 250, there's only 3 or 4 that don't like me. And on a bad day, I stay away. It renews my hope. I hope it does for you as well. So God, renew my hope. My hope in Jesus, so that whenever I come into this place, I walk a little lighter. I feel a little better. I'm blessed because I walk with Him and because I walk with you. So God, renew us. Renew our strength, our determination, and our hope. So for 2015, yeah, there was a lot of bad headlines out there. But there's a whole lot of good headlines right here. Many of you I've gotten much closer with. I've got to know you better. And Steve, I still like you, buddy. I've got to know Steve much better. They go on our senior luncheons, and we've got to know each other much better. I'm blessed by renewal, and I pray that you will be. 2015, oh yeah, there was those negative headlines, but in my heart there were very positive things that took place. I know terrorism is a terrible thing. I know the economy is very tough on us. I know that the drug issue is very bad. But folks, I know one other thing. I have the answer for all three. And I call Him Jesus. He can change our world. But not if we quit, roll over, play dead. We're a church. We are the bride of Christ. We are the future of America. And without us, this world's in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. You have the message that gets them out of this life into eternal life. Hope. Well, I wondered how to close this. It's just basically a review in a few scriptures to know that God walks with us, that I still have a vision. I'm going to ask you this. Keep on keeping on. Deb and I have been very fortunate to travel in our life. We've traveled a lot of the United States because I have a tendency not to take a day off if I'm in the county. I come to work. So we'll get out on my week off and travel. And we've been privileged to go to South Dakota, and we've seen Mount Rushmore, and we've been to Crazy Horse Monument or Memorial. They're in the Black Hills. And we've been there at least 3, maybe 4 times. And each time they've dynamited a little bit more. Crazy Horse was a Native American, a Lakota warrior. The artist's name is so hard to pronounce, but bear with me. Zylo-Kowiski. That's the only time you're going to hear that. He started in 1948 building the Crazy Horse Monument. He died in 1982. He stayed the course the entire time. Never took any government funds because he didn't want anyone telling him that they had to do it a certain way. He knew how it needed to be done. His wife, Ruth, took over the project upon his passing, and she worked at it until 2010. She passed in 2014. They had 10 children. All 10 have worked there, and one of them continues to lead the project. They have grandchildren who are now into the project. It wasn't easy. It's a little bit at a time, but the Crazy Horse Monument is starting to take place. Here's a family that had a vision and just kept on keeping on. They didn't quit. I had a vision back in 1977 that my son would be in the ministry. That was my hope, and I prayed every day for it. And he is, and I'm happy. I have a vision that I got 2 grandsons that will continue on, and I pray for it. In 1977, I had a vision when I come to Latonia Christian. I may have lost sight of that for a few years when I left, but I renewed it whenever I come back. And that vision is so important to me that nothing negative can define us. Because, folks, this is the real deal. Have that vision. Don't quit. Be prepared to pass it on to your children and to your grandchildren. Be ready to pass it on and not quit. So for 2015, that'll be the last sermon you hear this year from me. But it's one that I hope will resonate with you. Tell me, what's going to define you? What will define 2015 for you? 2015. Well, I heard a story that I'll close with. There was a family delivering some gifts, and the family was doing it in the name of Latonia Christian. And on 2 different stops, one of the children would come up and go, "God bless you. God bless you." Will you stand as we have our invitation?